Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm here today with a familiar face. Uh, one episode ago, I spoke to Ram about AI, and it looks like we've not had enough, so we're back for another session. Welcome to the podcast, Ram.
Yep. Thanks for having me again.
Yeah, I think today we have something that's super interesting, not just because it's something that we enjoy talking about, but also because we think this has huge market relevance. So, in the field of AI or all of the talk around AI, one important trend that, like, big picture that we've been noticing is the capex for what the companies are investing in for AI heavily outweighs the revenue. So the companies are spending huge amounts, but we are yet to see the revenue that kind of like makes um, sense of that capex, or like at least realizes the benefits of those capex. Ram has like he's done a lot of research on this in the sense he has like a lot more background on like what I'm talking about. So I'll let him kind of like explain what I'm on about with this capex versus revenue.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, this is a very relevant topic. I think this all started off with some of the reports from big banks and investors. Especially there were three reports within the last 2 to 3 weeks from Goldman Sachs, from Barclays, and Sequoia, talking about how they could not see the relationship or the expected relationship between the amount of money that's been going into AI investments across the board on all these companies from all the big tech companies and the amount of revenue that's coming out of all of those investments.
Mhm.
So the titles, people are calling it the $1 trillion problem. It's being called the $600 billion hole in revenue, and this all of this interest and chatter around will we ever see that revenue, that is raising questions, like bigger questions like, are these investments worth it? Are we investing too much? Should we slow down? Should companies stop and focus on what they're already doing and strengthen their existing businesses? So such big questions are being raised by investors and shareholders. And last week we also had all of the earnings calls from all the big tech companies.
Mhm.
And something that was very clear was what these banks are reporting. The amount of money going in is pretty high. For example, Microsoft reported that they're investing $19 billion per quarter, and they're expecting to see that go up in building out their cloud, building out Azure, building out data centers across the board. Google is investing $12 billion a quarter. Meta is investing close to $40 billion this year just on AI, on acquiring more GPUs, bringing in more compute power, talent to grow their capabilities and infrastructure. And not just this, like this growth in AI and the expected growth that companies are seeing have spooled off investments in data centers. There is a huge data center boom where Amazon has, I think they've proposed $50 billion in data center growth. And there are already places across a lot of states that have been marked off for data center growth. Like, and this time, data center growth is happening on places like Indiana, Wyoming, Idaho, on states that can be capable of delivering more power to these data centers, while
Mhm.
usually this was not the case. So yeah, overall there is a lot of money flowing into this, and the questions being raised is it worth doing that? And what you hear from some of the big tech CEOs is that this at this point the risk of not investing and growing this infrastructure and being in the sidelines is much higher than over investing. So that's kind of where things are going, and they're expecting the use cases to show up. And building out the capability right now is more
Mhm.
like an arms race. Like you cannot really let your competitor grow all that capacity while you stay on the sidelines. And then when things start showing up and when you actually see users start using this infrastructure, it might be too late to grow your infrastructure at that point. So that's some of the questions that's been floating around over the past few weeks. And yeah, I've been thinking a lot about this, and there are a few things that I wanted to point your attention to. So let me pull this graph up. This was really interesting to see. Okay, so here goes. So this is a graph that kind of plots the S&P 500 index and the number of internet users in the US across the same timeline. So it's between 1994 and 2004, and we all know kind of what happened in the whole 2000 dot-com bubble. So one thing that you see here is, the value of S&P 500 has gone up, steeply, and a lot of this was driven by the interest and growth around internet, and a lot of companies that were investing in internet around the same time. And then around 2000, there was a big crash where you see the market value coming down. But one thing that you'd realize if you look at the green line, which represents the number of users of internet over time, we've seen that steadily going up. So one thing that I would point out here is it's important that we look at the growth of the technology separate from all of the market economics that's going on, irrespective of the growth, irrespective of the crash. Like, I believe that the number of users who are starting to use technologies driven by AI and the number of people who get exposed to this is going to continuously climb. So that's something that I honestly believe is going to be the case, and this eerily looks similar to what happened during the dot-com crash. But by no means am I calling a crash right now. But irrespective of what I'm trying to say here is, irrespective of what happens in the market, the number of users is going to grow, and we're going to see these use cases improve over time. So that's
Sorry, like, yeah, like, has that always been a good indicator in the past of number of users versus like technological growth? Has it always been with the growth of technology, it gets cheaper to deploy to more people, the adoption rate increases? Do you expect that to translate to AI?
Yes, I do. So if you look at a couple of the last two cycles, like the dot-com cycle and the mobile cycle, as more and more people get into this space, more and more people start using a given space.
Mm.
Uh, costs get a lot cheaper. A lot of companies, including the whole logistics and supply chain, all of those companies are working towards optimizing cost and optimizing performance, and use cases start growing. The more users there are, like, you start seeing trends on how people are using these technologies, and that overall builds that ecosystem up. So I believe that's kind of where AI is headed as well.
Okay.
So yeah, that's kind of what I wanted to open with. So given all of these changes that's going on at this point in time, and this growth of users at this point in time, I think it's it's imperative that we talk about use cases, brainstorm about use cases, kind of come up with what will make AI really useful to people. And it's not just, and another big thing that you hear from a lot of the users is LLMs are being added into everything at this point in time, where in
Yep.
cases where you might not really have to, and that's causing a lot of failures, a lot of loss of trust on the system. So it's not just about adding LLMs, but can we talk about what will really make a difference, what will really get people to start using the new technology, given that in some cases it might even mean relearning how to do something, or using a completely new interface that we're not used to do something that we've already been doing. So yeah, I'm really excited to talk about this topic, and I think it's imperative that we talk more and brainstorm more about the use cases.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, even when you were like talking about the growth of the technology
Mm-hmm.
and how cheaper um, deployments is going to allow for like more adoption because more people have access to it, I feel like with AI at least, there has to be use cases.
Mm-hmm.
There are, like I said, like, unlike the, like, what happened with the internet or what happened with mobile phones,
Mm-hmm.
where there was a very clear niche or like space in the market
Mm-hmm.
that was not filled before, that was filled by this new technology.
Mm-hmm.
I think with AI, like you just said, there might be existing use cases that we've learned to use in a certain way that AI makes better, and it might require people to like relearn how certain things work. So you can think about like simple things at work, like writing an email, or like there doesn't have to be, like, it's not a niche that needs to be filled, but we know that our productivity is going to like increase tremendously by adopting these kind of tools. So I think specific for AI, the use cases and like how the companies can decide like design tools that are like customer facing and solves actual problems that need to be solved is going to be crucial. So that kind of like segues nicely into like a kind of like structure for today, and like how we wanted to like discuss like customer facing product ideas. The goal for today's podcast, and I hope this is going to be a fun one, because a lot of this was us like putting together things that we think would be interesting. It will be excellent to hear from people who listen to the podcast and get feedback on like how many of you guys think these are actually going to be useful. But our idea with this podcast is to like come up with a list of customer facing product ideas that we think either AI has like completely unlocked as a brand new avenue, or something that like exists already that AI can exponentially improve on. And what we're going to do is we're going to score each of these ideas based on 3 categories. The first one is going to be feasibility. So we're going to score everything 0 to 10. Feasibility is how feasible we think it is with the current technology to get this done. So if our idea can work with the current technology, or like it can work within the next 2 years or so based on the current growth of the technology, that's going to get a higher score. If it's like something that we're going to need several years or even decades of like advancement to get there, that's going to get a very low score in feasibility. The second one is market relevance. So that's pretty straightforward. How profitable do we think this idea is going to be? How much do we think people are going to adopt it? And like how much monetary sense does it make for companies to pursue it? The third one is innovation. So this one's slightly more subjective, but this is how much we think this idea is going to fundamentally change the way that we use the technology. If it's just something that's going to take an existing feature in an app and make it slightly better, it's going to get a low score. But if it totally changes the way that we interact with products, with media, or like how a workflow typically is, if it completely changes it, we're going to give that a higher innovation score. So essentially, yeah, we're going to list out a bunch of ideas in different fields, score them based on these 3 categories, and then see how it goes from there. Does that sound good, Ram?
Yep, that sounds great.
Awesome. Okay, so I think the most number of ideas that we have here listed out kind of falls in the media / like entertainment space. Like typically speaking, a lot of technology, like the growth of technology over the last 20 years, have very been closely tied to that media and like entertainment space. So it's not surprising that we think that a lot of what AI can contribute to is in this space. I can get us kicked off with like one idea that I have, and then we'll kind of like flip flop between the two of us, and then we'll give each other scores, and we'll go from there. So the first idea that I have here on my list is a music app with filters. So this is like my current take of the current technology. Currently, the industry trend around I feel, is too focused around generated content. So, like, we're already seeing like clips on social media, like about like AI generated clips that is like typically very abstract, right? Like dogs doing a fashion show, or like it's sometimes too out there, and it's very obvious that this is AI generated content, and I definitely believe that there are use cases for like purely AI generated content that's brand new, but at the current moment, what I think would be a good on ramp towards um, AI generated content, or at least what I think would be AI enhanced content, is to still stay rooted in media that's created by humans. One good analogy that I thought of was when Instagram first came out, one of the biggest kind of selling points around Instagram was filters, right? Like it didn't really change or like create new content. It just took your content and modified it in a way that was fun and like added a little more, and people wanted to like share that. So like it was still relatable because it had something to do with you personally, and it was still grounded in like that shared reality between your social group. So like it still kind of made sense. So analogously, what I think will have people hooked is a user facing music app. So like think of Spotify, Apple Music, or YouTube Music, where people are able to like change the content of their existing library in like meaningful ways. Some of the examples that I can think of is like if there's a song that came out in the 80s, um, you can you can maybe have a prompt that says reimagine the song if it was composed today, right? So like it shouldn't just be taking the old song and like remastering it. It should be about like using newer equipments. Like how would it sound if that song was like created today? And some other like as fun aspects would be, hey, how would this song sound if it was sung by someone else, right? Like that's already pretty, like there's a lot of these going viral already in social media where like old songs are being taken and like recreated if they were sang by like different people. So and then like we add like a media element on top of this where like users are able to like share these modified versions of existing music. And the way that we keep these monetized is the original creator, any other likeness that you might have used, all of these stay on as labels in this new like track you've created, and like it stays within the app so that you don't end up with like this huge library of like AI generated music that the content creators are not too happy about. And you can even take this a step further where like artists are allowed to like actively contribute to this like AI generated music library. They could like go in for like recording sessions, provide high quality voices that the Spotify's and the YouTube musics of the world could use, so that their voices can be used to recreate older songs and it stays on as tags, right? So this was kind of what I thought about. Like I've given this a feasibility score of 9 because I feel like the technology I feel is there. We've seen this happen. Like there's several people on the internet who've already worked on these kind of projects. So I definitely feel like the technology is already there. The market relevance, I've given this a 9 because I feel like this could be like one of those cases where like one of the music companies like the Spotify's or the Apple Musics of the world, if they get to this first, they could potentially like reinvent the way that they monetize um, like revenue from music.
Mhm.
If they're able to get several artists on board and they're able to like advertise this in a way that um, the artists don't feel like, hey, you guys are like replacing us with AI generated content. Rather, they feel like, okay, now we're like contributing to this large pool of like both user and AI generated music. That is going to like catch on very fast. The other thing is, I feel like this has a huge like virality factor. Even with like people have a huge sense of nostalgia for older music and reimagining it with like people they like from the current age and like the inverse as well. So the fact that all of that kind of like ties in
Mhm.
to this like one unified space where like it's easy for people to like create this kind of content, I feel would catch on pretty fast. So I've given it a pretty high market relevance. For innovation, I've given an 8. Um, Kind of for reasons that I spoke about before. I do think that once you have this like AI enhanced music, it's
Mhm.
totally gonna like change the way we think about music. If there's that one song that we hate just because someone we don't like sang it, that's
Mhm.
no longer going to be a roadblock to consume that music because you could just like change it.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, like I think this is gonna be like one of those ones where like the music industry just flips on itself and like goes towards like it's a combination of like a social factor where the community is able to create versions of um, audio tracks that artists have imagined in one way, and like then that adds more value and like it gets shared, and it's like there's like this new kind of like ecosystem for music. So that's kind of what I think will happen to music with the advent of AI.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. In terms of finding that fascinating and useful, yes, I'm definitely with you there. There are
Mm-hmm.
certain songs that new songs that came out that have
Mm-hmm.
been converted to have look like or listen like how it would have been a, a, a famous singer who was deceased recently. Those type of
Yep.
songs have gotten really famous, and I have to admit that I've liked those versions sometimes a lot better than the original versions.
Mm-hmm.
This does, bring about interesting questions on, okay, so singers, like the greatest singers of all times, can continue to live on forever, then what would happen to the new
Yep.
talent? So all of those questions do come up. Yeah, I think
Mm-hmm.
that's a whole another discussion by itself. But in terms of feasibility, I completely agree. Like it's very highly feasible at this point. To add
Mm-hmm.
probably some more technical color, there was this model that was released by Meta very recently. I think not less
Mm-hmm.
than a year ago. They called it Music Gen, and it was built on top
Mm-hmm.
of some of their work from 2022, which is called Encodec. So they have this way of
Mm-hmm.
encoding music, quantizing it, and then decoding it into many different formats that they want. And that model has been made available for people to play with. There's a technical publication on it, and
Mm-hmm.
they even have a website where they have examples of how you could play with music. Maybe we
Mm-hmm.
could link that in the show notes. But
Yeah,
yeah,
sure.
yeah, it's it's still a technical work at this point in
Mm-hmm.
time, and we could definitely build something around it that creates this experience and makes it more accessible to a lot more people. And yeah, I completely agree with the feasibility part. And market relevance, anytime there is a revenue share model, I think that works out very well
Mm-hmm.
for everyone involved. And revenue share with AI is something that has come into question a lot. Like with all of these tools
Mm-hmm.
using scraping the internet and websites and coming up with information based on other work, but without being able to clearly map to which work was used and share revenue with those
Mm-hmm.
parties has come into question a lot. I think we briefly touched upon this in the last episode as well. So
Yep.
this, in my opinion, solves, not solves, but at least uh, addresses that problem a little bit. It's not that music is being
Mm.
stolen, or it's not that someone is reusing someone else's work without due credit. Given the way in which you explained it, I think it's definitely possible to have that model to make everyone happy involved. Yes, and yeah, innovation wise,
Yeah.
yeah, I completely agree, and that's the way whenever I hear an idea like this, the way I try to judge it is, will I use this thing? Will I be a user? Will I be a user and will I
Yeah.
be a paid user? Those are like two levels. And yes, in this case, I will definitely be a user, and I may be a paid
Mm.
user based on how good the technology is or how well it's implemented.
Yep. Right. So I think we're in agreement on that one. I think we can move on to the next one.
Okay. Okay, so this again falls under media and entertainment. And I think
Mm.
this is something that has been spoken about a little bit. And this is text to movie. That's kind of,
Mm.
I think the title says it all. But
Mm.
where I'm going with this is right now, all of these media platforms that we use, including Spotify, YouTube, and Apple, and all of them, and Netflix, they all have a really complicated recommendation system algorithm behind them.
Mm.
And
Yep.
some of those systems are better than others. For example, in my opinion, Spotify has some of the best recommendation algorithms, and they've
Mm.
invested a lot in their algorithms. They've built it using graph neural networks, and they've spoken a lot
Mm.
about it. And that's something that is one reason I'm willing to pay for that service.
Mm.
Though there's YouTube and YouTube Music, and YouTube Music gives you free YouTube and all of that. Irrespective of that, just their recommendation algorithm is good enough to get you introduced to new music that you would like.
Mm.
And more often than not, they're pretty spot on with their recommendations.
Mm.
And given such powerful recommendation systems exist, they are, I wouldn't like calling them handicapped as going is too strong, but they can only
Mm.
go as far as giving you content that already exists, and kind
Mm.
of, you know, make a guess on, okay, this person might like this content that already exists. So it's like trying to cram in an existing square shaped block into probably a squarish shaped hole. But
Mm.
given all the generative capabilities, and the context that you have using recommendation systems, can we go as far as generating end-to-end media content? Like it could be, short form
Mm.
media, it could be long form media, and the type of movies where we come
Mm.
up with content that I know I would be interested to watch. It's
Mm.
not about just scanning through Netflix across like hundreds of tiles of thumbnails to find something that you might like, and then trying to look
Yeah.
up IMDb ratings, trying to see, okay, do I like, will I like this? Is it worth investing 2 hours of my time into watching this? So can we go as far as generating content based on all the context that we already have, and making sure
Mm.
that it's interesting?
Mm. So yeah, this, like, I have a lot of thoughts on this, and because I think
Hmm.
I mentioned some of this even in what I just spoke before, right?
Hmm.
Where, like, number one, when it becomes personalized to a level that is, it works best for one user,
Hmm.
you kind of lose that shared reality of, like, hey, I watched this movie, or like I listened to this song.
Hmm.
What do you think of it? Maybe it can get to a point where, like, if you really like something,
Hmm.
you can, like, share that with some other person, and um, it's executed that way. But I think there has to be some, like, delineation of, like, how far we can take, like, personalized content. I don't know if you're, like, on a different page with that, because
Hmm.
for me, at least personally, one of the biggest um one of the biggest reasons why, like, movies are entertaining for me is the fact that it can be discussed with friends and, like, other people that I know, and, like, you have this, like, conversation about it, and like you analyze it, and um, you see the same content from different perspectives, and that's a very valuable part of the movie watching experience for me.
Mhm.
And I feel like generated content kind of like gets rid of that um, shared reality. Um, that being said, I feel like this is where the market is headed, though. Like I feel like this is going to be one of those things where like um, I can sit here and like talk about how I dislike it, and I don't want things to be this way, but I feel like um, that is where we're gonna end up. And when we get to that point, I feel like after I've seen like 3 or 4 successful cases of Netflix generating movies that I thoroughly enjoy, I feel like I'm gonna be forced out of feeling these things. But um, without the technology there yet, like this is kind of what I feel, and I feel like this is a very like personal bias against like this kind of technology based on what my interests are. But that's kind of what I kind of think about generating brand new content based on one user's preference.
Yeah, I agree, but I think we've seen that trend happen, like where
Mm,
historically you would have like a couple of different channels showing you content, and the entire
mm,
city probably watches that government published broadcasted content, and that's all you had.
yep.
And we've
Yeah.
come from there to having like streaming services to so
Mm,
many different avenues of entertainment in so many different
mm,
shows. And I think it's just a step in the same direction, but probably a much stronger uh, trend in
mm,
the same direction. But I agree.
mm,
Like I still do, and I enjoy talking to my friends about what we watch, what their
yep.
interpretation of what they watched is,
Mm,
and understanding those differences, things that I missed, and understanding the symbolism of things that I missed. So that's definitely a
yep.
part of the fun, and that does, go away with these things, or maybe not go away, but
Mm,
significantly gets reduced. Um,
mm,
but is that it's more like a trade-off, right? Like, what do you want? Do you want something that's
mm,
completely personalized and you don't have to talk about it, or do you want something that's
mm,
really generalized? And as
yep.
as I was going through all of these, okay, let's discuss the scores and then we'll get back to this. But in terms of
Sure.
feasibility for this, like I gave it a 6, just because
Mm,
it, this like specifically about long form content, the amount of
mm,
compute that's probably required to do this is tremendously high. Like if you want to
mm,
generate what 2 hour 60 frames per second coherent content, it's going to be significantly expensive at this point in time. Though the
mm,
compute costs have been driven down significantly over the last 2 years, it's still going to be sizable, and
mm,
and that level of coherence still does not exist with the current diffusion
yep.
models. So
Mm,
though we do see things going that way, there are a lot of examples. There's Runway. There's a company called Runway. There is Sora from OpenAI that we all saw.
mm,
There's another interesting one called Odyssey. There is I think it was Hyper. I think I don't know if I'm pronouncing it
mm,
right. There are all of these companies that are working towards
mm,
such not specifically towards long form content, but more like text to video. And
mm,
there are some interesting tidbits, some interesting cases, and sometimes they turn out to be really, really scary examples of videos. So
yeah.
so there's quite a bit of you know there's still some distance to go in terms of feasibility at this point.
Mm,
And in terms of market relevance, I gave it a 7.
mm,
Some for some of the reasons that you went over, like would
mm,
like what would people pay? Like who would be willing to
mm,
pay for something? Assuming that works very well, maybe yes, there will be people willing to pay for this. But
mm,
it takes away some form of the social aspects involved with consuming media,
mm,
which is kind of why I gave it a 7. Maybe if it gets really good, then it gets better. Um,
mm,
and in terms of innovation, I gave it a 9 because there's a lot of work to be done
yep.
and a lot of breakthroughs
Yep.
to be had. to get to that
Yep.
point.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, like on the market relevance piece, like how do you think like Hollywood or like media companies are going to react to, like, let's say if Netflix just added like a page uh, on their app that allowed text to movie, or like
Mm-hmm.
created content based on everything that you've watched. Um, I'm sure they're not going to be too pleased with that. Do you think they'll start pulling content from Netflix? How do you think that interaction's going to be?
I think there is definitely going to be a disruption in that field, in this sense.
Mm,
Like if this comes to a reality, but them pulling content away from Netflix is not new. I think that's already happened, assuming that
mm,
Netflix is the one who will be doing this. So we have already seen that with the advent of streaming services, where movies
mm,
started getting released on streaming services directly instead of releasing it to the
mm.
theaters, like how we've seen movies for decades. And
Yep.
that caused this whole disruption where, which
Mm,
theaters were unhappy, and that caused a huge disruption of movies, like production uh, services that release movies on streaming services were kind of banned from moving or releasing on theaters. So there was all of this chaos that was
mm,
going on. I think this probably exacerbates a little bit of uh, what's already
mm,
going on. But I cannot think of anything that can slow this down
mm,
just because people are unhappy about this.
mm. Yeah, like I just thought of this, but like, I think me personally, if I had to choose between movies
Hmm.
and other video content,
Hmm.
I would probably be much more receptive to, let's say, I watch videos on YouTube about like tech reviews or like
Hmm.
stock market or whatever it is. I don't think I'd be too upset if
Hmm.
my favorite content creator wasn't the one presenting that information to me, as long as it was presented in a way, um, like you said, is like perfectly tailored for me.
Hmm.
So I feel like, if anything, like services like YouTube might benefit more from, like, or like I would be more receptive if a YouTube was replaced by more generated content compared to like the entire movie and the theater going experience. I feel like there's still some value in retaining that.
Oh, think I'm completely flipped on that perspective.
Okay,
So
interesting.
I'm I'm looking at it as fictional and factual, and all
Okay.
of the YouTube content that
Mm,
I'm consuming,
I see.
for example, these reviews and all of that, I categorize
Mm,
that as factual, and I'm watching certain content creators specifically because not just because they're reviewing the product, but I want to get their take on the product. Like for example, when I'm
mm,
watching an MKBHD review of something, yeah, I can definitely look up the specs of all of that online somewhere else, or even listen
mm,
to the keynote. But like I
yep.
specifically want to know what he thinks, because over the years I have gotten to trust his intuitions of how he
Mm,
judges the products, and how I in turn end up looking like when I use the product, do I map relate to whatever he's saying? So for such
mm,
content or the factual content, I would still probably stick to people who I know and trust. Would a model take that place? I don't know. Uh, but
mm,
for fictional content, I'm more open to having, it's all creative, right? Like, can a different entity be more creative, and can I relate to
mm.
that creativity and enjoy that? So I think I'm flipped on that perspective.
Yeah. No, that's totally valid, right? Like, I was thinking more so, if the model knew what I liked,
Hmm.
maybe. So, like, instead of me having to like calibrate myself to a reviewer's like preferences,
Hmm.
if the model can like directly tell me if a product is going to work for my preferences,
Hmm.
that seems to
Okay.
be that seems to like reduce one step. But
Hmm.
no, I think this is like, yeah, this is going to be one of those things where like we're going to see a few products come out, we're going to like use them, and we're going to like realize that there's so many different ways in like people in which like people approach it. So for the sake of time, otherwise like we're gonna be stuck here forever.
Yeah.
We'll kind of go to the next one.
Yes.
Um, yeah. So which one do I pick? Okay, so we'll pick this one that I think is quite controversial and potentially interesting. Um, I'm calling it social media algorithm modifiers.
Okay.
So the intention for this would be to give control of social media algorithms to the users. So I know immediately after I said that sentence, like Mark Zuckerberg is like wincing somewhere. it's like no way. But yeah, so like some examples, a lot of what I've put down here is like with Twitter in context, because that tends to be the social media platform that I use the most. But I guess it applies to like other places too. But I would like to see things like allow for the users to do things like, or like say things like reduce the toxicity of my feed, or like show me the other side a little more, or block comments that drive a certain agenda or are offensive in a specific way, or even take it as far as to do things like help me spend less time on this app, right? So the dials that we're pushing here needs some kind of context and like an understanding of the feed and the information that I'm looking at that currently the algorithm struggles to like figure out. So for example, when I say something like reduce the toxicity of my feed, it needs to understand what I consider toxic content. And it should be able to like effectively modify my feed in that way that is meaningfully adding value for me. Same thing with like show me the other side a little more. Like if I want to get perspectives that is outside of my social media echo chamber, which all of us are like currently stuck in, it needs to understand like what I agree with, and like what my preferences are based on, or like what my beliefs are based on the content that I interact with, or like directly by asking me questions about what I think about certain topics, right? So I'm picturing like an assistant that's like built in to the social media app, that I'm able to like converse with, that I'm able to tell, hey, like do these kind of modifications to my feed, and it's able to like do those things more effectively. The other thing is like if this assistant is going to be part of my social media feed, I would also want it to like more robustly track what I'm doing. Like, for example, I would like to ask questions about, hey, like, what topic do I spend my most time in this platform? Or what echo chambers am I stuck in, right? So, like, I want it to give me like more context about my usage pattern straight back to me, right? So immediately there's a few like concerns here from the company's perspective. The biggest reason why Twitter or Instagram or TikTok has been successful is the fact that their algorithm is closed and it works in such a way that it improves the retention of a user on the app, and hence they're able to serve them more ads. So everything revolves around this ad revenue model and keeping people on the app for a longer time, right?
Yep.
So if we have to go to this new approach, I feel like there's no other way to go there other than doing a subscription model, right? Though, like, although I disagree with a lot of things that Elon has done with Twitter, I think him pushing a subscription model with like user verification that this person is a real user, I think that was a huge right move. Although right now it's kind of like devolved into something else. But
Mm-hmm.
the concept of having a subscription model for social media, I feel needs to come in, um, just because I feel like we've had social media and we've seen what it does to society for long enough to understand that an ad based revenue model for social media is just bad for society in
Yep.
general.
Yep.
So, um, and I'm like half confident that in the next 5 years, there's gonna be some kind of like intervention from regulators or the government, where like we reach a point where like there's just too much misinformation and too many echo chambers, there's just too much divisiveness in social media that someone's going to step in and
Mm-hmm.
something like this is going to show up. So, um, the market relevance part for me totally hinges on that, like how the next 5 years goes in terms of like, are people more open to adopting a subscription model? So, um, on the feasibility side, I do think this is feasible. Like, um, for a language model or some version, of an AI tool that is able to like understand my feed and like have context of my activity
Mm-hmm.
on the platform, I feel is pretty feasible. There might need to be some extra work that needs to be done specific to this use case because I haven't really seen um, too much work in this space. Maybe you have, but I would think this is like technically feasible, but maybe there's not a lot of work done there
Mm-hmm.
in that space right now. So I've given that an 8. In
Mm-hmm.
market relevance, I've gone straight down the middle with a 5 because, like
Mm-hmm.
I said, this only works with a subscription model, and
Yep.
like if people are going to be receptive to paying a fee to use social media is a big question mark.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like if there are regulations and like if certain um, laws are passed, maybe it will force companies to like think in different ways.
Mm-hmm.
But again, like I think the market relevance factor is a huge question mark right now. In terms of innovation, I've given this a 9 because number one, yeah, like it fundamentally changes the way that I would use social media. Like I'm more context aware. I would um, like have a better understanding of like where I am relative to the rest of the social in my social media. Like I would
Mm-hmm.
know how I am compared to my like wider community, which is like there's no way to like self reflect
Mm-hmm.
in terms of like a communal picture right now in social media.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that will be huge, and I also feel like in general it's going to make social media less of a cesspit. Like
Mm-hmm.
I just feel like it's going to improve the overall experience. So I've given innovation a quite high number, but yeah, like I think all of this kind of hinges on like market relevance. Like how do we get people or like get companies to like adopt this kind of approach?
Yeah, I know. I agree. I think a couple of things that came to mind was one was I
Mm.
think Twitter recently open sourced their algorithm, and they put it all out
Mm.
there. Yeah, we should link that down in the notes as well. That was also a
Mm.
very interesting move, and I
Okay.
was I was really excited to see that. Like, look at the inner understandings of what does this algorithm do.
Mm.
I still don't know if that's the one that they're currently using. That's the latest one, or has that changed since
Mm.
then? I don't know that much, but them going as far as releasing that was a big deal. And
Mm.
this was also since Elon took over.
Mm.
And the point that you mentioned about having an entity or uh, like what I would call an agent in that case, who
Mm.
kind of has a broader perspective than what we as users of the platform have. Like
Yep.
what you essentially want to do is break out or zoom out of that echo chamber and see what the broader
Mm.
landscape is about, and understand where you're stuck or understand what we're not
Mm.
seeing. And this, I think, a subscription model makes a lot of sense for this because it involves significant compute.
Mm.
It's not going to be for free. So yes, a subscription model makes sense. And there was a recent interview in which Zuckerberg mentioned that there's going to be a point in time where, not very far away, that the number of agents are going to be much more than the number of humans on the
Yep.
planet, uh,
Yep.
which I think makes a lot of sense. And
Mm.
every storefront or every entity today has a phone number and a website attached, and all of them will end up having an
Mm.
agent attached to them. So in that sense, yes, if you have your own agent on your social media platform, who kind of understands and answers these types of questions that we don't have answers to at this point in time, or uh,
Mm.
you know that's behind a curtain that we don't get to see. So that
Mm.
definitely improves experience in my opinion, and that's something that I'd
Mm.
be willing to pay for. Like if I can
Mm.
go that far as, you know, making those changes and improving the experience, then
Mm.
that's something that's worth the dollar amount that's
Mm.
being attached to it. So in terms of
Mm.
feasibility, I think all of those the knobs that you mentioned, toxicity and relevance and all of that,
Mm.
I think those already exist in the social media
Mm.
platforms today. There is those things already exist, but it's just that people are not given control over those knobs.
Yep.
So
Exactly.
feasibility is pretty high in my opinion, and innovation, yes,
Mm.
is fairly high because it's a totally new experience on
Mm.
the way we are using this things that we're spending a lot of time every day on. And market
Mm.
relevance, yes, it's not that high. I don't know if it's as low as five, because I'm
Mm.
excited about this, so maybe I'm giving it a 6 or a 7. But yeah, I think I totally see the point in having that zoomed out view of the social landscape and being able
Mm.
to like make sure that you are not really stuck into something.
Yep. No, yeah, like I know like social media for me is like I know every time we speak, I kind of like take all the conversation and somehow bring it back to social media. I genuinely think that if we solved the social media problem,
Hmm.
at least most of the perceived evil, and I'm calling it perceived because like most of the evil in the world seems to just exist in the space of social media through the lens of
Hmm.
social media. So if we can somehow like I don't know, like fix that, I feel like it just improves like overall well-being of like humans like significantly. Like I tend to think that a lot of what of our problems start with social media. So yeah, so that's why kind of like even for me that's like this is a pretty exciting one. Like I would like to see this happen.
Hmm.
Um all right. I think we'll keep going. I have a bunch of like smaller stuff on the
Hmm.
entertainment stuff, on the entertainment side.
Hmm.
Maybe I'll like quickly like shoot through them. We don't have to
Yep.
like linger too much. And then we'll go on to like other stuff that we want to talk about. One thing that's
Yep.
like kind of close to what we just spoke about on the social media side was an internet-wide fact checker,
Hmm.
almost a global community notes kind of situation.
Hmm.
I don't know how like feasible this is because this kind of like ties in back to like some of what we spoke in our like previous episode about like
Hmm.
understanding what is true and like how well a large language model would be able to do that. But essentially, what I'm thinking of is an internet wide fact checking overlay that flags misinformation right there on the screen. It needs to work on like all of like it should be truly global, which is why I say internet wide. Like
Hmm.
it should work on your phone, it should work on your computer. If it's on your like television, like if there's a way that it could work there, it would be awesome. And it like similar to community notes, it should like cite sources and allow for people to mark if it's useful or not. So this is the reason why I think this is like super important is again, like getting on to the, like getting the world back to some form of shared truth, right? Like we're again stuck in like echo chambers. There's it's always very easy to dispense a lot of misinformation. It's super difficult to debunk it in real time. And I think that is where the power of AI, when it gets good enough, might be super useful. So if we can, I don't know, if there's like presidential debates and like someone's like saying something that's not true, there has to be some kind of mechanism outside of a bunch of people doing the research on the spot, like something that's instantaneous that will allow for people to, you know, spot misinformation and have that flagged. I think this is a pretty difficult problem because you're talking about like we as a like as a community and as like a group of people, we often struggle to align on shared truths and like what like we struggle to agree on what is factual and not. So I assume it's going to be a similar difficult problem for a large language model or any other kind of like algorithm to like get to a place where it's reliably able to like say if something is like factually true or not, because there's always going to be like outliers that disagree with those facts. So I've given it a 6 feasibility. Market relevance, again, this is a 6 because I cannot think of any meaningful like revenue outside of like there has to be some kind of like subscription type model where we pay for the service, because inherently there's no way for this tool to like make any money. One, like the other way I think that this could help with like wider adoption is like we need to like move this cost as far away from the end user as possible. Like for example, if this cost the cost for like paying for the fact checker, if it is tied in with, let's say, the cost to like that we pay for internet, I feel like that would be one easy way to like kind of like take this away from the user, or like make it easier for the user to pay for it. On the innovation side, again, like I feel like this is like I put it down here because I feel like it's important. So I've given it a high innovation score. Again, like this is one of those features that I passionately want to happen, purely because I personally believe that we need to get to some kind of shared reality where misinformation can be identified quite rapidly.
I agree, but consistently having things checked as things go on, like how close to Black Mirror are we getting?
Yeah.
But you could argue
Yeah.
that where we are right now is not a great place either with misinformation.
No, that's true.
Yes, so innovation wise, yes, I think it's necessary, and how far we take that technology is going to be an interesting debate.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, and it's also not going to help with like, I don't know, like the way that people are going to react to be like with when everything that they say is fact checked and they're like always being corrected. I don't know if I don't know if it's just going to make public discourse even more difficult, rather than it making it easier. So yeah, I think this is a difficult problem, but potentially something that
Yeah.
someone smarter than me could like think of a more elegant solution for.
Can we make
All
it
right.
incrementally better is probably a good.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I definitely agree with the problem. And yeah.
Yeah. All right. The next one is like super straightforward. This is almost like a personal gripe that I want AI to fix for me. This is like generated video game commentary for sports games. Anyone who's played FIFA,
Uh-huh.
I think for like 10, 15 years now, they have the same voice recording from the same person when you're almost about to score. Like, I feel like this can so easily be improved.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if an LLM had access to like exactly what is happening, like again, let's just take FIFA, right?
Mm-hmm.
If the LLM has more context as to like what is going on, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
if one player is about to score and he misses,
Mm-hmm.
that like the LLM should know how many misses that person has had in
Mm-hmm.
that match, and like he could make a comment about that. Like it's there's just so much scope for improvement
Mm-hmm.
because of how shitty the current commentary is on like sports games. So I
Mm-hmm.
think like any form of like generated commentary
Mm-hmm.
for sports games is going to be an improvement. I feel like the feasibility wise, this is pretty easy. Both market relevance and innovation are fours for me because
Mm-hmm.
again, this is just like a nice to have.
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't know if like I don't know. Like maybe there are people out there who would, but like I don't know if this one feature would convince me to buy the next FIFA game. So the market relevance is like like a four, I guess. On the innovation side, yeah, this is not something game changing. So yeah, so it's just going to be a four there as well.
I think this is something that's where it's a job for on-device inference and machine learning,
Exactly.
where the developers of the game have complete access to all the visuals that get generated, and training something very specific on those visuals and having it deployed
Yep.
on device to analyze ongoing footage and taken frames from the existing feed is something that's definitely feasible. So yeah, I agree. It's definitely
Yep.
feasible and would be a welcome improvement to the existing gaming ecosystem.
Yep. I had one more on the game side. This I
Hmm.
think is slightly more meaningful. So if you've looked at NPCs, like non-playable characters in RPG games, like or most adventure games, again it's the same thing, right? They have an agenda in mind, like the developer, and they they always repeat either the same sentence or they have a pool of like sentences that they always repeat. Rather than that, if like the NPCs can have those agendas as part of um, like their coding and like they're able to generate context aware replies rather than just like saying the same lines over and over again, that just is going to like improve the experience much more. And like you can also allow for those models to like more organically calculate things like for example, um, there are like things like friendship scores in games based on like how you interact
Hmm.
with NPCs. That can be much more like organic rather than typically speaking, it's like you give them a bunch of gifts or like you do a bunch of tasks and they start liking you. So it's just much more organic. Like for things like GTA, for example, right? Like for the I know that it's too late for the current version that's about to come out, but for maybe the next version of GTA where like there is just so much generated content specific to those locations where or like those like virtual locations in which the game happens at. I feel like a lot of that you could have models that generate truly interesting new things
Hmm.
on the fly based on like what's happening on the screen and like
Hmm.
how I'm progressing through the game.
Yep.
And in my opinion, if the entire narrative of a game is based on like how it's going to evolve based on like how you interact with characters in the game, I feel
Hmm.
like that's a much better selling point than like commentary, for example, right? Like
Yeah.
it totally your experience of the game um, changes every single time you play it based on how you um, like based on the choices that you take. So um, this again, I feel like I'll give it a lower feasibility score because I put down an 8, but the more I think about it, I feel like this is going to be pretty tricky, especially if there's going to be multiple characters and
Mm.
like you said, like this is going to have to be on device, and it's going to take a while for the hardware for like our consoles and like even uh, like the computers that we might play these games on to be able to like do that kind of compute. So it's probably going to be between like a 6 and a 7 there. I think this would have a higher market relevance and innovation, like um, purely because it changes the gaming experience in a way that's like unique to every time you play it, and it also and I also personally think it would be a huge selling point for those video games. Um, like my like I am a huge fan of Pokemon games,
Hmm.
and the one of the most frustrating parts about it is that although the stories might be really good, like we're stuck in these like repetitive loops where like you're stuck with people and NPCs that don't have context aware replies and you're
Hmm.
unable to progress when you get stuck.
Hmm.
So there's several specific games like that I feel would it would like totally make it a brand new experience. So I feel like market relevance, innovation pretty high is probably difficult to execute on.
Yeah, I think this comes down to dynamism and context awareness,
Mm,
which is something that can be added to games with existing technologies. Uh,
mm,
so yeah, I think it's definitely relevant. But is this something that would convince someone to upgrade, buy?
mm.
Uh, Probably it's
Exactly.
based on
Yeah.
how significantly it changes the experience.
Yep. Okay. Um, I think we can move on to like the next kind of like big topic that we wanted to
Hmm.
touch on,
Hmm.
which is like health and
Yep.
fitness. I think you had something
Yeah.
for this listed. You want to start? Yeah.
Yes. So I think this specifically comes from the capability of AI to reason out and
Mm,
understand relationships between different data points. Well,
mm,
what I mean is currently there is, there's a lot of sensors. There's a lot of wearables. Like we have watches, we have bands, we
mm,
have rings that can
mm,
pretty accurately and reliably get a lot of information of, the function of the human body, like in terms of
mm,
recovery or fitness or the amount of
mm.
effort that we're putting in and tracking all individual metrics like
Yep.
heart rate and breath rate, like a lot of things. So we have a bunch of data there, and then we have a bunch of data that comes out of our regular medical testing, like in terms of our cholesterol
Mm,
levels, glucose levels, and then there's a bunch of
yep.
information there, and then there is more information of research coming out regularly on
Mm,
what's probably the right way to health and fitness, like not the
mm,
right way, but I would say like the right way to work out, or what's good and what's
mm,
not good, what type of foods.
yep.
And there's different verticals or pillars of significant amount of data that's being generated, but where
Mm,
I see a gap is in being able to put all of these together and come up with a coherent
mm,
narrative or actionable steps. So
mm,
can we have like an agent, like I'm again going back to agents, where
mm,
it's trained on the latest research and has the ability to reason out the sensor
mm,
data that we have along with all of our individual
mm,
medical markers and give us actionable insights. So this, because of A, B, and C on these three things, like this is probably something that you should change. Like,
mm,
probably not eat like an hour before, or those are very
mm,
general recommendations, but I'm talking about more specific actionable steps, like consume
mm,
more. This is where your gap is, like your breakfast's not as protein
yep.
rich, or specific
Mm,
insights that we can take actions on. given that we have all of the data that already exists out there, but we just don't have a way of putting it together and reasoning out about it in one coherent manner. And in terms of feasibility, I'm giving this an 8 or maybe even a 9, because I think the capability already exists. It's just about putting it together. And market relevance, I'm giving it a 9 because I think it's very relevant given the number of users that are investing in devices like Apple Watches and
Yep.
rings and the other fitness bands that are already pretty popular out there. And in terms of innovation, it's probably not that big a step like from where we are today, but it could be a really good add-on. So not giving it a 7 on the innovation front.
Yeah, like I actually spoke about this to one of my friends about like health data in general.
Okay.
So one of his questions was, and like I think like you kind of answered it because you wanted the models to be kind of like it needs to read or like it needs to have knowledge of like what the most relevant health information in the studies are. But his question was, if you have enough information, why do you need an LLM or any kind of AI model? Like, can't it just be an algorithm? Like, if you already have all the input variables, like what extra value does a large language model or any other AI model add?
So the research that's coming out of academia or the other companies is the way we get that research is in natural language. It's not specific variables. So you have a lot of text to parse and understand and figure out what the research is about and how that
Yep.
particular research maps to the biomarkers that we're talking about. So I don't think that bridge exists. And is it that's kind of why I'm talking about it as like a model that reasons the whole thing out and not just an algorithm. An algorithm works if you're just talking about the biosensor data and our
Yep.
personal health metrics. Okay, so variable A is high, so do B. So
Yep.
that's a very simple correlation, but attaching that with all of the other variables and the research data is why I think it's a little more complex.
No, yeah, I absolutely agree. I'm like very into like collecting all of this health data. I'm like, I have a lot of like health tracking stuff. So I'm like super interested in all of this. And you're right, like the end of the day, it comes down to having actionable insights, like what I can do to like improve my health. And that tends to be the big gap, right? Like even with like traditional like health apps that currently exist, we have a lot of information, but not a lot of like advice as to like what specifically needs to happen.
Yep, exactly.
Okay. Yep. Mine that I put down for health is also kind of specific, or sorry, like similar to what you just said. But what I wanted to add to that fold is like vision based tracking. So my idea was for AI vision based workout and health tracking. So the way I picture this is there's a dedicated host of cameras that can be placed in your workout space. And then let's say even if there's more than one person in that space, AI vision can be used to like track each user individually. Then it's able to identify what type of exercise I'm doing, the amount of weight I'm lifting, and then it's also able to count the number of reps. It can do really interesting things like if it can look at my facial expressions, it can gauge the amount of effort that I'm putting in to each rep. So it knows like I'm pretty close to failure for this kind of exercise with this kind of weights. And then all of this information from the cameras, it can work together with the wearables that I'm wearing. So let's say I'm tracking heart rate using a watch. It all needs to like I said, it needs to like tie in. Eventually, if we can get to a place where like we have AR glasses, or like even if I need to take a picture of my food intake with my camera, like all of those, the AI is able to interpret what I'm eating, predict the amount of like estimate the amount of calories based on the image that I took, estimate the macronutrients.
Mm-hmm.
So it all kind of like similar to what you said, right? Like there's just so many like segregated places of information for like health
Mm-hmm.
tracking, and all of those get integrated into one spot.
Yep.
Um, so for feasibility, I gave it a low score of a 6. The reason is I feel like the tech is there, but
Mm-hmm.
I feel like if it's a home gym and
Mm-hmm.
I have a camera there, maybe I'll be fine with it if the if the agent is processing the data locally,
Mm-hmm.
um, like within my house. But imagine like Planet Fitness or like
Mm-hmm.
some large scale gym attaching cameras uh, in their gyms. I feel like a lot of people are going to be pretty creeped out
Mm-hmm.
about it. Maybe that will change, but my feeling is people don't want cameras in public gyms looking at them.
Mm-hmm.
So I do feel like both in terms of like market relevance and feasibility, this is going to be a blocker where like not a lot of people are going to like want to be like vision tracked.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Market relevance, again, like if we can get past the ick factor, it can tie into like things like gym memberships where like um, on like there can be tier levels. Like if you want to be tracked, you pay a higher fee, and then the AI tells you like when you walk out of the gym, it gives you like a report of like, hey, you did this exercise, these many reps, this much weight lifted,
Mm-hmm.
things like that. In terms of innovation, again, like I feel like I've given it a 5 right down the middle because yeah, like I think for me personally, like I'm someone who wants to know like how all of these relate, and like I personally take an interest um, with tracking all those health metrics, but I don't know if like it changes the layman's experience of like working out and being
Mm-hmm.
healthy. I feel like without these tools, people can still find ways to like do their workouts and stay healthy and like track stuff the way they want. Like I feel like this is purely going to be one of those things where like our experience is enhanced by having these insights, but it doesn't completely change the way that um like health tracking and like staying healthy and like working out. I don't think it completely changes that.
Yeah, agree with most of what you said. And in terms of feasibility, yes, I think there are some apps today that use the Apple Watch data to track,
Mm.
reps and range of motion and all of that as
Yep.
you're working
Mm.
out, which is pretty interesting. But when it comes to vision tracking, there's definitely more information than just relying on
Mm.
one sensor. And there's been a lot of work on pose estimation over the last few years
Mm.
that you could really understand what the pose of a human body is and map that to an
Mm.
ideal form of a given exercise to give that particular
Exactly.
feedback. And in terms of
Mm.
usability for laymen, yes, I agree there are other ways to probably uh, you know be healthy and track fitness, but it's about the level of abstraction. Probably you want to know more about, okay, what does the specific
Mm.
metric do and how do I optimize this
Mm.
one specific metric. But for even for somebody who doesn't care that much about those metrics,
Mm.
they do care a little bit because that's why they're working out. And
Mm.
if the level of information can be abstracted away to specific, like general insights, like the amount of time
Mm.
that they're working out for, or the like overtraining indicators, like even that level of abstraction
Mm.
away from these technologies would still be useful to anyone who is trying to already get to the gym. And anybody who's getting to
Mm.
the gym would want to make the most out of the amount of time that they're putting in, like including a commute, like
Yep.
time being there. So I think it's a good value add. It's not something that significantly changes things, but it's a great value add in my opinion.
Yep. Yep. Okay. Anything else we want to add about health? I know there was like a lot of work on like radiology fields like that.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
I thought
have
I
you
just didn't know
heard
enough to
anything interesting there?
comment on that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. Like, I think, yeah, exactly. I don't have the latest on that either, but I've heard that there's a lot of progress on that side. Like, I've seen some articles that suggest several fold improvement compared to like humans with
Uh,
picking up cancers and stuff like that.
yes, even on mammography, there was some recent announcements
Mm.
on improvements, and there's been some work on. I think this was few years, been around for a few years now. There's work on diabetic retinopathy on ocular research,
Mm.
whereas Google worked with hospitals back in India to come up with algorithms on because it's a very controlled environment. You have like specific photographs taken in
Mm.
with special cameras, and you have a very specific
Mm.
image dimensions. And people like it's not even anything to do with Gen AI or LLMs. It was like well before
Mm.
that. There, all you need is a camera, and you could get checked out for certain inefficiencies or deficiencies.
Yep. Okay. Perfect. We'll move on to the next kind of topic that we've listed down here.
Hmm.
Education. You want to
Hmm.
take this one?
Yes. So this is something I'm really excited about because I see
Mm.
this actually having a significant impact in the way I do things already. So
Okay.
this is something that I'm personally excited about in terms of so the way the books that we read and the articles that we consume are probably some of the
Mm.
primary ways of education at this point in time, or like visual, like video content on YouTube
Mm.
and other mediums is the primary way of education, and all of those mediums of eh, consumption, we are looking at someone else's interpretation of a given subject or
Mm.
topic, and that's great. Like there's a lot of researchers and people that we trust who we learn from, who are teachers. That's great, and that's part A of it. And the part B is we go through that experience and looking at the interpretation of someone else, we create our own interpretation and perspective of a given topic,
Mm.
and we do our best to come up with the most accurate perspective that we can get of that particular topic. And what's missing there is the feedback loop of making sure
Mm.
if that is correct. So I saw an hour-long YouTube video, or let's say I took a Coursera course, I
Mm.
did that thing, and then I have an interpretation perspective of that particular idea. But that's it. It stops there. There is no feedback loop in terms of
Mm.
okay, this is what I understood. Can you tell me if I did it right, like if I know
Mm.
if I'm actually getting it right? And that particular the transaction does not exist, the feedback loop does not exist, which I see as the
Mm.
thing that changes the most with having personalized tutors, where
Mm.
each person has a different level of understanding of different topics. And
Mm.
sometimes you hear an explanation, but you still don't really get it. You want a simpler version of the explanation, or
Mm.
talk more about the fundamental concepts involved in that before you build on top of those concepts to understand something new. So that's where I think personalized tutors can be really helpful. For example, like when I'm trying to learn something new or a completely new topic, the way I have started doing it is using the voice mode in ChatGPT, where you just put your headphones on, talk to the model for 30 minutes or whatever. Like if I'm on a drive, I'm talking to the model and okay, teach me this particular topic. Like teach me about, for example, back
Mm.
propagation of an AI. And it gives me a whole spiel of things. And then, okay, I still don't get it. Can you make it easier? Like talk more about the fundamental concepts, and then it gives me a bunch of things. And we go through that back and forth. And then now I'm speaking out what I understood from that. And then in most cases, like the AI is able to come back and correct some nuances.
Mm.
You got most of it right, but this one part's not accurate. So this is what changes. And that has, for me, significantly improved the way I'm learning. And
Mm.
that's just using the tools that we have available today. That's not a personalized AI tutor in any way. And at this point, uh, it's all text based. Like it's not drawing images or it's not plotting graphs for me. But taking it a little bit further, like we could have like, topic specific or category specific AI tutors that have the full spectrum of what's out there, and be able to explain one on one at different levels of difficulty, and also correct the understanding. Like, okay, visualize. Okay, you're telling me something I don't understand. Can I ask it to visualize it? Like, a lot of people are visual
Mm.
and they understand visual concepts better. So can you visualize it and show me why? Like, what do you mean? So can it come up with a visualization to do that? So that's what I'm finding really exciting. And I know there is some work going on. For example, Khan Academy is doing a lot of work on that front. Uh, so in terms of feasibility, yes, I'm giving it an 8 or a 9 maybe. It's definitely feasible. And in terms of market relevance, I'm giving it a 9 because it's really interesting, and would be really useful for a lot of people uh, across the board, not just for kids going to school, but across the board. And in terms of innovation, it's probably takes a lower score because I think there is a good portion of the technology already exists, and it's more about making it an agentic flow to do specific things the way we want it to do.
No, yeah, I totally agree. And I think this is going to be huge in terms of like I can already think of so many examples for like a country like India where like
Hmm.
high quality education is
Hmm.
not available throughout, and the amount of people per classroom is pretty high. So a lot of children, or like even people in colleges, don't get to have that like one-on-one like interactive time, like you said, with the tutor, to ask those questions and like clarify their understanding. So I think this is going to be huge. Like I feel like, yeah, like education and like AI tutors, I feel has the ability to like um, make or break economies for like some
Hmm.
of these more developing countries where like um, having more like educated manpower is going to be huge. So yeah, I feel like this is like one of those big ones that AI is going to help us out with. Awesome. I had one that's kind of related
Hmm.
to education. I was like debating between putting this in like media and here, but this is for like I'm calling this last mile media translation.
Hmm.
So essentially, again, like a lot of this comes from like me thinking through um, like some of the issues that we have in India around the fact that there's so many different languages,
Hmm.
and one very active barrier towards um, like getting high quality education or getting good jobs comes from the fact that there is that language gap.
Hmm.
So how do we get to a place where like um, language is not a barrier for transmitting intelligence or gaining knowledge, right? So one of the like one of the places that I feel like we can start with is last mile translation for media. So you can think of local translation models running on device where media is consumed. So like this could be your TV, your phone, tablets.
Hmm.
The goal would be to do the translation on device, synthesize an AI generated voice similar to the speaker's voice.
Hmm.
Um, and maybe as a bonus, like you also like deep fake the mouth motion. So it totally matches up, right? Like
Hmm.
someone's um, like there's a video in English and like someone doesn't understand English, and there's a button on their TV and they select the language that they want and it's like perfectly translated locally on the machine, and they consume uh, the information in their language of choice. Again, like the reason why like this particularly came up for me is like after the elections in India,
Mm-hmm.
again, like on my Twitter feeds specifically, it's probably the echo chamber that I'm stuck in. But there was this one video of Rahul Gandhi speaking in the parliament in English.
Mm-hmm.
That was like a lot of this, like the South Indian people who didn't natively speak Hindi.
Mm-hmm.
There was a lot of like appreciation that he spoke in English. But I feel like this shouldn't be like a factor at all. Like
Mm-hmm.
in a country like India, where like half the country doesn't understand the rest of
Mm-hmm.
the country. Like we need to get to a place where like everyone's able to like get to a place where like we're able to real time translate.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually, like long term, we work towards like human augmentations, right? Like for voice and hearing, like maybe it's like a small earphone that we wear, or like some other augmentation, right? Like that it we get to a place where language is never a limiter for knowledge gain or knowledge
Mm-hmm.
transfer. So um, that's kind of what I think could potentially. I feel like this is one of those things that could like totally change like so many different things about the world. Like you
Mm-hmm.
could travel anywhere you want without having the concern that what if I can't speak the language? Yeah, so from a feasibility perspective, I think this is a hard problem to solve,
Mm-hmm.
especially the part where I said about um, local translation. Like if we need to get to a place where our TVs and phones and laptops or any other devices that we consume media on needs to run models that is strong enough to do um, AI speech generation, translation, and potentially like modifying videos. That's going to be pretty tricky. So feasibility is probably going to be like a 6. Market relevance, as much as I think this is like going to be like a very meaningful way in which AI changes the way we interact with other humans, I find it difficult to imagine that we would be willing to like pay a price for this.
Mm-hmm.
Um, um, like more often than not, we tend to like stick to what languages that we're comfortable with and like we're happy with consuming content from those places. But I think with eventual realizations of the benefits, things might change. So I'm giving that again a 6. On the innovation side, again, this is a high score for innovation because I feel like this totally changes the way we communicate with other people fundamentally. So I think that's a 9. That's going to be a high score. But what do you think in terms of like the technology? Do you think this is something that's actually possible, or is my feasibility of a score of a 6 even too high?
No, I think it's definitely possible. At least for some of the top languages, yes. For the language that we have a lot of content already, and you
Mm,
see that growing significantly. Like you see, if you look at the languages that Google Assistant is adding support for, or some of even
mm,
ChatGPT is adding support for regularly, you see that list growing significantly, and they're able to do those
mm,
translations. And there are a lot of examples of doing those translations in real time. And what excites me
yep.
more is this is something that for any time you come up with the question, would somebody be willing to pay for this? Will is this a service? Like do you
Mm,
like how do you monetize this? And in many cases that kind of automatically suits well into the on-device
mm,
AI solution where these kind of things where a pre-trained model is deployed on your TV or on your system that
mm.
you're already using, and all it's doing is taking in the incoming feed and translating it for you. So that's something that really excites me about this particular use case. But I think the feasibility is definitely a little higher because we already
Okay.
have examples of this happening in real time. Like
Mm.
as you're speaking, it's happening in real time. So yeah, I would, in my opinion, in my books, it would be a higher feasibility.
That's good to hear. Okay. The last one we had on our list is legal.
Yes. So
Yeah.
that's coming from a personal gripe of mine, just like your video game one. Uh, so what kind of annoys me the most is more often than not, like there are you kind of
Mm.
have agreements that show up for you to sign. Like it could be as simple as
Mm.
an insurance company sending you an agreement to sign, which has a lot of complex legal language that I really can't
Yep.
make sense out of, and I'm not really comfortable signing that agreement until I know what it's about. So
Mm.
there have, for example, there was this thing called Legal Shield.
Mm.
Nothing against that company. I did have a subscription, but anytime I sent them something for review, it was like, oh, this review is not covered in the package that you have paid for. You need to pay for A, B, and C, and like it never helped. So that's kind of been a blocker every now and then whenever like there is something for me to sign. So is there, given the tight boundary conditions that we have around legal, like we know there is a
Mm.
specific set of laws. It's not something that's vast and out in the open. There's
Mm.
specific set of laws that you have, and these legal agreements follow a specific language pattern, and they're supposed to follow a language pattern, even if I don't know if they do now. I don't know enough to make that judgment call. But
Mm.
given that, and given the model being able to reason about and interpret what that's about, and can it tell me, okay, this is what this document means. You can go ahead and sign.
Mm.
If not, okay, these are the 3 points that you should clarify before you sign the document. So that would be like a big step forward for me personally. But on top of this, given I was talking to a friend of mine about why is it so expensive? Anything to do with legal, like why is it always such a big deal? And like we are in a really litigious society where there's a lot of lawsuits and lawyers involved a lot of times, and that's always a concern of, oh, okay, what's this going to mean? And again, going back to those boundary conditions and the amount of, from my conversation with my friend, I understood that a lot of time that they spend is on researching precedents and understanding what happened in the past, what were the decisions about, how can they leverage such precedents for their current case. So it again follows the specific format. And given it's all about knowing about what has already happened, can an agent that is aware of all of this give you specific pointed advice? Can it pull the right information already? Okay, this is what your case looks like, and I found 10 similar cases from the past, and this is how all of those played out, and this is what you could do. So that would be where I would probably see it go. Someone who has more experience on the legal side might have better ideas, but this is just from my understanding of talking to somebody in the field and probably trying to solve a personal problem for myself.
Oh yeah, 100%. Like exactly. There's so many legal documents and like user agreement forms that we sign without having any idea what's going on.
Yep.
No, yeah, I feel like that would be super useful. Yeah. Okay, I had like one more random thing here that
Yes.
I don't think fits into any of these categories. So we'll kind of like go over that and kind of like reflect on um, what we've spoken and why we think like it's important to like think of these use cases and like how we think these are going to play out in the next few years, right? So one thing that I had was a true OS level assistant. This might be something that the likes of um, like all of the big tech companies are going to be working on with like Android and iOS, Microsoft with Windows. Essentially, a true OS level assistant that can control system settings. Right? I would like for the assistant to be permanently running in the background and to allow for like context aware interactions. Like one random thing that I wished my my MacBook could do that is not easy to do right now is I was running a specific software that was transferring data between the MacBook and my Android phone, which is like impossible to do, by the way. Like someone needs to like fix that. But that when that software was running, I needed my computer to stay awake. So if like I needed to like do a bunch of Google searches, figure out where the settings were, turn off the setting that says keep the screen on, even if I don't interact with my computer. If I could say it's something like keep my screen on until I next close the lid, or like things like that. That's like for people who've been on Android, like there's this one software called Tasker that allows for like this level of like automation where like you can specify specific conditions and like you're able to automate system level tasks. I feel like with close enough interaction in the like integration in the OS level, I feel like we'd get huge boosts in the way that we like interact with our devices. Like I don't know. I can think of so many use cases for like hey, turn off the Bluetooth when I connect to my home Wi-Fi, or I just think there's so many potential places where like an assistant or an agent that's like always running on my computer to like constantly help me like throughout my experience with that device. So I think it's pretty feasible. So I'm going to give that an 8. Market relevance, I don't know if it's going to directly affect how the market responds, but I feel like with enough cool examples, I feel people are going to make switches to devices based on these features. So I'm giving that a 7. On the innovation side, I think this is again between a 6 and a 7. Like I do think it's going to change the way we interact with our devices. Like a big part of like, let's say even with this podcasting setup, just setting up the microphone, figuring out how to like connect external devices, things like that. A lot of troubleshooting on the system level to make sure it's compatible and things like that. I feel like if the OS level assistant can kind of like, if it needs to make changes to its system settings to accommodate for a certain kind of external device, it should be able to do that by itself. So if it's able to do those kind of things, I feel like that's like a 7 or an 8 for innovation. But I think it's about time that we had like something that's like much more integrated to the operating system.
I think all of that's not all of that, but at least some form of that is coming soon, at least from what we've heard from these companies. But only
Yep.
not anyone can deploy this. It's just the system integrators who can do this. Like it's probably Apple, Microsoft, and Google who
Yep.
can have that level of access and do this. And it comes as a balance between being able to provide that capability and security on opening it up without like what are the restrictions. Like right now, even when you plug a camera and let that, it has to show a box and make sure that you approve and allow access. So what level
Yep.
of, where do you draw that line? So all of those questions are being answered, in my opinion, at this point in time, like where as these technologies are coming up. But yeah, that would be really useful. Something that could go as far as the movie Her, where you have like
Yep.
true OS,
Yep.
true OS integration. That's the first thing that comes to my mind when we talk
Yep.
about OS integration. But no, yeah, I completely agree that would be really useful. Like right before this call, like I had to figure out how to, integrate my trackpad into the system, and I didn't get to do it. Like I don't have it now. And if we had that integration that you're talking about, that would have been a lot easier.
Yeah. Okay. No, I think we spoke about a lot of different interesting things. And like even between just the two of us, right? Like there was I would call it like we had varying perspectives on how we would use some of these technologies. And I think that's extremely interesting. I encourage the people listening to this podcast to like chime in with your guys' opinions of like where LLMs, AI in general can improve, and like how you think or where you think the most valuable use cases are. But end of the day, I think the last like hour and 45 minutes is a testament to the fact that there is a lot of like meaningful ways in which AI changes the perspective of like how we use technology, and a lot of those I feel is going to drive like revenue eventually to like close that gap, right?
Yep.
So I think um, like it's just a testament to the fact that a lot of these companies are right in like making these big bets,
Mm-hmm.
because there's just so much potential
Yes.
to get out of AI.
Yep. And yeah, just going over this entire conversation, like what stood out for me was one, the feasibility scores have for these similar ideas have gone significantly up with the recent breakthroughs. Like
Mm,
maybe if we had this conversation like 18 months ago or 2 years ago, uh, these scores might not have been this high. And another thing that stands out is a lot of the stuff that we spoke about goes from takes things from generalization into the personalization category, where a lot of stuff is now generalized. Like it's just the lowest common
mm,
denominator of all the users, and let's just implement something that will work for everybody. That's where things are when it
mm,
comes to things that we spoke about, like health and fitness, education, media.
mm,
So all of these categories kind of are trying to be as general as possible. And what the ideas that we spoke about move them from the generalized category into the personalized category, and
mm,
it's definitely an exciting time. And like before we close, I'm just tying it back to the first part of the conversation we had around revenue and the gap between
mm,
investments in this. One thing that I keep going back to is this one interview from the late 90s. Let's just play one clip from that interview. This is an interview of
mm,
Jeff Bezos somewhere from the late 90s. So let's cut to the clip now.
But I believe that if you can focus obsessively enough on customer experience, selection, ease of use, low prices, more information to make purchase decisions with, if you can give customers all that, plus great customer service, and with our toys and electronics, we have a 30-day return policy. If you can do all of that, then I think you have a good chance. And that's what we're trying to do.
You're not really a pure internet company anymore either, are you? I mean, you've got millions of square feet now of real estate. You've got a huge and growing inventory of items that you keep in stock.
We do whatever.
And you've got thousands and thousands of employees now.
Yeah, we have over 3,000 employees and over 4 million square feet of distribution center space. And those are things I'm very, very proud of, because with that distribution center space and half a dozen distribution centers around the country, it allows us to get product close to customers so that we can ship it to customers in a very timely way, which improves customer service levels. That's what we're about. If there's one thing Amazon.com is about, it's obsessive attention to the customer experience, end to end. And that's what those distribution centers
But
are
you're not
for.
a pure internet play.
It doesn't matter to me whether we're a pure internet play. What matters to me is do we provide the best customer service. Internet, schminternet, that doesn't matter.
Well, but it does matter to your investors to know whether they're investing in a company that
No, they should be investing in a company that obsesses over customer experience. In the long term, there's never any misalignment between customer interests and shareholder interests.
Well, that's
Okay. So one thing that really stood out for me in that clip was a lot of things. So, like for example, the conviction that he had in his idea. Though it's like a customer obsession is the idea, but the conviction he had was like great to see. And
mm,
though being like a new company at that point in the picture, it was very clear that he was looking at internet as a tool to achieve whatever the company wanted to do, and the company was trying to deliver on first principles. So it was not that the company was built around internet and had to embody everything that the internet embodies. That was not the
mm,
goal. It was exactly showing that okay, internet's a tool, and I'm going to use that tool and whatever it takes to deliver on the first principles that we're talking about. And I think that's an approach that is still very relevant. And it's not that AI has to be the center of everything and adding LLMs into everything is kind of the solution, but it's about using this new tool to deliver on first principles. That's kind of, I think, I would look at things that way, and that's kind of what closed the gap. of where we are, irrespective of where the market goes. I think the technology as itself is going to continue to grow and get to a point where where it becomes useful for a large population.
Yeah, perfect. I think we'll end it there. Thank you everyone for listening. Yeah, it's always fun like talking to you, Ram, and like thank you again for joining for this session.
Yep, thanks for having me. This was fun as always.
Yep. All right, guys. Bye-bye.